Mehek, thanks a lot for really taking us through all of that. The key really being that we're looking towards a system for more transparency and, of course, accountability. Now, to discuss this further, we have quite a lineup of guests with us this evening. We have Ghulam Zia of Knight Frank. We also have Neeraj Sharma of Grant Thornton, Sachin Gulati of JLL India also joining us on the phone line, and also Gitambar Anand, that's the president at Credai. They, of course, track the realty space very closely and are joining us to really break up the latest bill for us right here. In fact, I'm going to start with Neeraj Sharma, who's right here in the Delhi studios with me. In terms of what this means for that primary goal that we had in terms of transparency within the real estate sector, the credibility that it brings along, what do you think the impact finally is?
So I think it's a long battle, that's been sort of won by a lot of industry associations that have been pushing for it. And I think, it to a large extent, settles the issue of perception for the sector. I think the large players, most of them are working in the right direction. So I think to a large extent, I would say that it creates a lot of transparency in the entire regime of the sector.
Okay.
With a lot of information which would be available to the buyers, which will really help them to to decide which all projects they need to consider. So I think on an overall basis, a great decision.
It's a very positive decision. Vikram, you want to come in?
Absolutely. Let me take that to Ghulam here in the Mumbai studio as well. Ghulam, perhaps you just heard what he just said. Do you agree with most of those points? Because as far as transparency is concerned, now that's something that industry has been looking forward to. Much more consumers than developers, one would say. Is it as much of a positive for developers as it is for consumers with the kind of law that is being put in place here?
Well, let's first of all put things in perspective. This is something which was the need for this bill was felt for consumers, because consumers always had a raw deal for so long.
That's where it started.
So the whole idea, like the whole excitement or the jubilation has to be that ultimately today in real estate, consumer will be the king in India. And that's where it begins. Now, your question is more whether the developers will have, how will developers take it? Well, I'm sure you have other panelists to answer that. But from my angle, well, the biggest advantage of this is that the lost credibility. The whole sector had actually lost credibility. The confidence was lacking. Buyers were actually very disturbed with the way things were going.
Yes.
And hence the consumption had come down. And the biggest problem that the whole industry is struggling with is lack of consumption. There are not enough buyers who are coming ahead and buying. And one of the biggest reasons, single most and the biggest reason is that because of lack of confidence in the developers' willingness, ability, capability to complete it and give as per the contracts, as per the agreements and so on and so forth. So with this bill coming in, I'm sure the industry will actually get that long needed credibility, and which will obviously reflect on the developers.
It's going to take its time, right? I mean, this is something that will be a process.
Look, it's like this. If you look at the whole RERA that we see today, it's an absolutely time-bound process. There were earlier concerns that housing is a state subject, so every state will have a different way of looking at it. Mind you, it's not so. Every state is given that, hey, here is the Bible for you to follow. You may change it as per your requirement, but it can't be lesser, it can't be softer than what we have put up.
Right.
So they can make those changes, and it is time-bound. In 3 months, you have to put up a regulator in place. In another 6 months, you have another milestone to achieve. Another 1 year, you have to have the regulator active. So these are things which are very clearly put across. So I don't really see that this process is going to take decades together. Not really. In a very time-bound, in a year, you will see the results of it on the ground.
Sure. Fatma.
All right, Mr. Zia, I'm going to just ask you to hold on to that. Wonderful to have your inputs. But we also have Mr. Gitambar Anand, the president at Credai, CMD ATS Infrastructure as well, joining us now. Mr. Anand, just to ask you, really, you've heard those 2 points that our guests had to make. One really about the transparency that was needed, the kind of positive development this is, and also how the transparency and confidence is going to also spur consumption in a sense. What do you have to say about today's developments?
See, as an industry body, we have always asked for a regulator, and we welcome the regulator. We only wanted certain issues in the bill to be addressed from our side also, because Credai has been trying to bring in transparency and answerability amongst its own members, and we have succeeded to quite an extent because we have something called a Consumer Grievance Redressal Forum. But having said that, I must say the bill is very balanced. And, it does talk of the delays and approvals that talks of a single window clearance to cut down delays in delivery of possession of projects. So it has put us also, it has brought forth our problems with the sanctioning authorities. we also appreciate the fact that it has addressed the issues of the consumers. But it is balanced in the sense that it also penalizes consumers who try to actually invest in properties and don't pay up on time, thereby also creating more delays in such projects. So that issue is also being addressed. It addresses both the developer as well as the consumer. So as an industry body, we are very happy. The only issue we were requesting the parliamentarians to address and look at was not to bring existing projects into the bill right now, because consider this, if a project is nearly 80% complete, we'll have to actually stall it, stop it, to understand what documents are required by the regulator for us to register over there. And they probably themselves won't have clarity right now on what we should be asked for. So that could cause unnecessary delays in projects which are already underway, and a lot of confusion could be caused. So we have always, insisted that you have it prospectively, not retrospectively. Having said that, once again, I am very happy, and as an industry body, all our members are very happy that the bill has come forth.
Will it be a huge problem, Neeraj, from what we're hearing from Gidambar at this point in time, if this is done retrospectively and not prospectively, as far as the industry is concerned and all bodies that would be stakeholders within the space?
So I think it's a fair point which I think Mr. Anand has raised, in terms of, what should be the applicability of the various provisions, which are being, talked about in the bill. And I think, government need to take a little pragmatic view in terms of what they want to really achieve. So I think, the point which Mr. Anand made in terms of a project which is already at 80% stage of completion, it really, taking out all the information and complying with, all those sort of provisions, may, also put, undue delay in terms of, those projects. So I think it's a fair point in terms of, what should be the likely date of applicability in terms of, there can be a view that, only the projects which are in the initial stage of, their construction can be looked at. I think the government needs to take a little pragmatic view in terms of which all projects they want to, cover, in the provisions.
So unless they take that pragmatic view, that we could see unnecessary delays and a lot of confusion as well. I'm going to take that point to Mr. Zia, who we have, of course, in the Mumbai studio. Just a little bit more in terms of, with your experience, what would you think developers would really be concerned about when it comes to this a regulator coming in, and also the nuances of the bill?
Well, I would want to chip in on this whole retrospective and prospective kind of a debate. We had this on some other platform. We were actually debating this. The whole argument came up that, we are expecting a huge disturbance in our project completions, etc. It's very difficult to believe because, I'm sure those laborers who are pouring concrete on site are not the ones who are actually making you compliant for RERA. I'm sure the developer will have to put up a separate team to come up with those compliance requirements. It's like any other, say, taxation requirement or something. When there is any regulation change, you bring in a separate team to get yourself compliant to it. It doesn't really, at least to me, it sounds strange to believe that you will have to come to a grinding halt. I don't want to believe that, say, automobile company will actually shut the assembly line and say, first I want to be compliant and then go ahead and start manufacturing the next car. It doesn't really happen. I'm sure it will be cost, it will be time, efforts, but then it can actually go simultaneously.
But also to bring in the point about the transparency over here, Ghulam, when you talk about these real estate transactions and, they are covered in a shroud of secrecy a lot of times, and you're talking about, the cash kind of deals, etc. Do you think that can go completely off the table now with the regulator coming in? Is that a possibility that we are looking at? And if so, what is going to be the likely impact?
Well, the same point was debated in the parliament today. The people who actually raised the question that the unaccounted money, the cash, the black, or whatever name you want to give it, how do you take care of that? So something which the minister, Venkaiah Naidu, spoke about was very clearly that if you're talking about 70% of the money coming in, resting in some account, which is an escrow account, obviously to a large extent your black money problem will be taken care of. So I want to believe him, and I'm sure there is a very strong point there that if you're putting the 70% of of your money in an account, obviously the issue of black money will be curtailed to a large extent. Today, there are markets where actually it could be 50% cash and 50% check and even more beyond that. So with this coming in, where 70% has to go in an accounted manner, where every rupee will be taken care of, I am sure it will have a strong control on your black money flow in the market.
Do you think there could be a drop in demand momentarily, even if it is?
Demand for black money?
No, demand for real estate transactions to take place. We certainly hope it's not this, but...
Not really. As I said, currently my problem, the whole industry is struggling with lack of consumption. And as I said, even now, it can't go worse than where we are today. Like, for example, the Delhi market today is almost about 30-35% of its normal size.
Right.
So what worse can happen to you? So I'm saying this is a good time for you to start, and the concern that the markets will shrink from here, I once again are not very strong believer of that. It will have pain. You will actually, as I said, you will have people to take care of your compliance requirements. You'll have people to work at your financial closures perhaps all over again, because quite a few of these things will actually mean cost, as I said.
Right.
So that those costs will have to be built in. And then there's a question, will this really rise the prices of products? Once again, market will decide, because ultimately it's a free market thing. Somebody asked a question that there is no curb in the RERA to check the absolutely crazy kind of price rises.
Correct.
Well, the RERA doesn't get into the free market. It's a free market. If the market is willing to pay that extra money for getting compliant to RERA, then obviously market will pay. But
that
if it is not willing,
controlled.
of course, that's something which will have, free market will decide.
Sure.
Vikram, I'm going to ask my guest, Mr. Kidambar, also to come in, because very patiently he's been on the phone line and we have two other guests in the studio. So I'm just going to ask Mr. Sharma to hold on. Mr. Kidambar, just to come to you in terms of what Mr. Zia was talking about, which is one, the overall effect that we could possibly see, and also in terms of consumption and prices going forward. What are your views on that?
See, I'd like to comment on what Ghulam Zia has said. It is not fair to say that the entire industry has been, very non-compliant and non-transparent. It is very, very unfair to say that there have not been good players in the market. It is very unfair to comment sitting over there that it's going to be very easy to comply for an 80% complete project and give all the documents. But if you were to be a developer, Ghulam, you would realize how difficult it really is to comply and you have to get a simple permission. Having said that, there will be no dearth of supply. There will be better supply. In fact, we have been pushing with various authorities to actually unleash more FSI, to make permissions easier, to get, a single window clearance. With that, more and more players, in fact, the established players will be more aggressive in their work. And we'll also have more new players come in on a clean slate, because the newer generation definitely wants to do things more professionally. We do come to the legacy, I don't deny that. But having said that, we all are looking at improving ourselves and also the industry at large. And I'm very, very confident that we'll have abundant supply coming in, which is reasonably priced. And we are also working together on the Housing for All objective of the government by 2022. And definitely we would like to participate aggressively in this whole endeavor.
Fair enough, of course, and that's something that we're going to discuss, but we'll do that right after taking a very short break. The Housing for All is what the government is after. Now with the regulator coming in, how much of that agenda can be pushed? That's something we're discussing with all our guests. To stay with us, we'll be right back.
All right, welcome back. We're watching this special show called Building India. This, of course, coming on the back of the day that we've seen the real estate bill go through to the Rajya Sabha. We still have our guests with us right now. In fact, I'm coming back to my guest right here in the Delhi studio. That's Neeraj Sharma of Thornton. Mr. Sharma, we were just talking about one of the biggest problems being delays when it comes to real estate. I understand there's been an issue in terms of delivery and also in terms of financing.
Sure.
What is this actually going to do on that very hot topic, and also one that's really been a turn-off for buyers as well as, I guess,
Sure.
on the other hand, developers as well?
Absolutely. So I think a couple of, takeaways from this development. So one is obviously now the developer needs to commit the time completion of project with the authority.
Okay.
Which will mean that, once he deviates, there'll be penal provisions on that. So I think that definitely will push the developer to ensure that he, commits to the timeline.
The crux of the matter was also the funding, right?
Yes, and the second point is the escrow condition which has been put in.
Sure.
So which will ensure some financial discipline, with the developers to ensure that they apply that 70% amount in those projects only.
Okay.
So that will ensure a, speedy construction of projects as well.
Okay, Vikram, you want to come in?
Yes, absolutely. So there are all these provisions now that are being made to safeguard the interest of the consumers. Changes within projects through the time that actual possession happens, Ghulam. Now that is also in check, and also this after-sales business, because now from what I understand, it's gone up from 2 to 5 years for any kind of defects that the consumer might have. Those can be corrected by the developer up to 5 years after possession. So these are all pluses coming in. You'd agree with that?
100%, 100%. You see, first of all, the idea of ensuring that you have to take the consent of the buyers if you want to make any changes. It's something very rampant when a couple of more stories are added to a building, or the playground becomes something else, and so on and so forth. It's very common. So here they have put up this condition that 2/3 of the buyers have to give you that consent. And then it's also yet another very fine point that it's very common that to have bulk buyers in projects. Somebody would have bought 10 apartments, 20 and 30 odd apartments, etc. Such bulk buyers were considered as one when you're talking about voting. So like it can't be, it's not possible that you bring in a huge investor who would have, say, cornered 70% or 20% or 30% of inventory, and then he will be the person who will decide which way the project has to change shape.
Right.
So that is also a very beautiful point that they have covered. And second thing is the defect liability things you spoke about. From 2 years it is brought up to 5 years. So these are a few things which will actually give a lot of cheers to the buyers who have been suffering for a long time.
Much more for the buyers, Fatma.
100%.
Oh. Okay, and Vikram, sorry to come in there, because I was trying to also just get Gitambar Anand back in terms of this whole issue of housing for all. How much of a takeoff do you really see going forward, given the fact that we're now looking at, the regulator, creation of a regulator itself, in terms of linking those two?
So it's all very well, and also if you go back to the budget this year, you see they have brought in a provision under Section 80 IBA, where they're trying to promote smaller houses. Now, our contention as a body was that you give these benefits, but the 30 square meter that you're talking about is really not a very attractive space for the first-time buyer, because there's an aspiration for most Indians to have at least a decent one-bedroom tenement. So what we have proposed to the minister is that you put a cap on the sale price of such housing for it to qualify for that income tax rebate under API. But you give us a range, because the finance minister has, he's spoken of a range of fiscal deficit also. We said you give us a range between 30 square meters and 90 square meters, depending on the market forces, and then you put a cap on the price. If you do that, then the private sector will be very, very encouraged to go to that space and actually roll out a lot of supply, which will actually rationalize the prices across the country. See, at the end of the day, the entire real estate market is not just about the 7 metros. There are smaller towns where people like to have at least a 1,000 square foot tenement, a 2-bedroom tenement, where they can, one generation can grow up in. Or at least for 10 years they can stay there before they graduate to a bigger apartment. But having a 60 square meter in a smaller town, on a high-rise development is not really very exciting for them. So our suggestions have been taken very well. And if this happens, then I'm very, very certain that if we get this range of making houses between 30 to 90 square meters with a cap on the price, you will definitely see a lot of supply coming in from the private sector. Also, the other major issue we had is about getting environment clearances for these projects, which have to be completed in 3 years. Now, the government has understood that very well, because once that happens, the only issue is that, that has to be, our recommendation is they should dovetail the environment compliances into the bylaws. And before we ask for an occupation certificate or a completion certificate, we should again be audited whether we've complied for the environment norm.
Right.
And if we thought, we shouldn't be given an OC. So this will speed up the entire process of delivery. The intent is to turn around the entire project in a much shorter time, so that it makes financial sense for the developer, and also the buyer gets his property on time.
The larger picture is that there is a lot more streamlining. Let me bring in Sachin Gulati as well. He's Director of Strategic Consulting at JLL India. Great to have you with us, Sachin. We started out by talking about how this could be beneficial, both to consumers as well as to developers going ahead from here. But looking at the government's goal, which is housing for all, looking at how this entire space is getting more and more streamlined, do you see the kind of interest building up from the private sector in terms of more investments coming in? Because access to capital has been something the the sector has needed for a very long time. And do you think now, with this kind of streamlining, with these set procedures coming in, perhaps as far as streamlining of the kind of OKs that you need, from the single window clearances that you need, if that comes through as well in time, do you think this could really see a takeoff in the sector, Sachin?
Oh, absolutely. I think this is a very welcome move. It is a long-awaited move, and we really welcome it. We've seen a lot of effort coming in this direction. Specifically from the private sector side, I think this is going to be the one big step that will address the crisis of confidence that the sector had been facing for some time. The buyers were not very confident whether they'll get their projects on time, and having looked at the number of provisions that this bill has provided in this law, I'm sure this is going to be a big fillip into the entire real estate sector as it goes forward. Further than that, we also believe that the more this sector picks up, there will be a lot of confidence that will come in from the capital markets as well when they see that the sector and the projects are moving forward. There's people who are buying projects, and there will be a lot of investment activity that we're foreseeing in this sector to come in future.
Mr. Gulati, just one quick question in terms of, besides what you're saying could actually spur that pickup and also the interest that's coming in from the markets. Apart from the single window clearance that one does hope the regulator is going to be able to really affect, we've seen a lot of fractioning in terms of the variety of laws that cover real estate deals, so to speak. So to that extent, do you think that there's going to be a lower amount of litigation that really comes through as a consequence of the developments we're seeing today?
Well, I don't really see this actually giving rise to lots of litigation. You see, the problem is that real estate has had...
No, simplification. I'm talking about simplification.
Yeah, of course, it will simplify the whole process, because what you're talking about are about 644 regulators all over. Every district will have its own regulator. So a lot of these things are built into the act, and that will actually simplify it. Like somebody in a remote area in Maharashtra state won't have to come to Mumbai. Will have to actually go to his own district office, where the real estate regulator will have its regulator actually sitting there. So from the angle of simplification, I'm sure a lot of simplification will come in. Where there is a dialogue, there's a debate that whether this is going to be yet another layer of bureaucracy, etc. At least I don't want to believe that, because I'm sure in the short term there will be some issues, but I'm sure like everywhere else, even here technology will take over, and a lot of these things will actually you will zip past lots of these requirements, the compliance requirements, etc. in times to come. So perhaps some heartburn in the interim, a year or two, but long term I see a golden future ahead.
Right, Sachin. So would you agree with that as well, what Ghulam is saying over here? Because there will be challenges, right? Putting a system in place is going to be tough, as we've seen in other spaces as well. A regulator is coming in to a largely unfettered sector, the way it's grown over a period of time. Whether you talk about the kind of transactions, the project delays, there have been so many issues with it. Now, to put a system into place and making sure that it works over a quick period of time, what are the big challenges that you see?
See, my feeling is that when you're looking at the overall sector, obviously, given that the large scale and the decentralized nature of the governance structures that we have in place in India, obviously we'll need to look at it from that perspective. But what I'm more happy about is that there is probably one clause within the overall bill which states that there will probably be no recourse, or will be very limited recourse to other agencies which provide, which will be able to look at the dispute aspects. So that will probably give a lot of comfort in the sense that the entire real estate asset issues or real estate project related issues can be taken off and resolved at the real estate appellate tribunal level itself, which will hopefully give a lot of comfort across the whole board. Because it will then help those people who are actually addressing these issues to address these particular points directly on the sector basis itself, and not having to run to other mechanisms as well.
All right, well, that's all we have in this particular special show that we've just shown you in terms of Building India, and also the latest that's come out of, the reactions that have come out of the real estate bill. This, of course, was a special show that was really supposed to reflect on the pros and cons and also the road going ahead. I just want to thank all our guests. That's Ghulam Zia of Knight Frank. We also had Neeraj Sharma with us as well from Grant Thornton, and Sachin Gulati of JLL India, as well as Geetamba Anand, that's the president at CREDAI. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. And the programming continues right here.
Thanks for joining us.